Every 4th of July, you watch fireworks light up the sky over a country that is only 250 years old. You've heard the story 100 times. Pilgrims, founding fathers, a declaration, a revolution, a nation born fully formed from an idea. But the real story is far stranger than the one you learned in school. The truth is that America almost didn't happen. Not once, not twice. At least 4 separate times, this country came within a single decision of collapsing completely. The version of history you know is simply the version that happened to survive. Start earlier than you think. Long before 1776, long before Columbus, this land already had a history stretching back more than 15,000 years. In 1997, archaeologist Tom Dillahay confirmed a site in Monteverde, Chile, that pushed the accepted timeline of human arrival in the Americas back by over 1,000 years. One dig quietly rewrote the opening chapter of this continent's story. Cities existed here, trade routes, governments. Entire civilizations rose and fell in total silence, centuries before any European ship touched these shores. Then, in 1607, a group of desperate Englishmen landed in a Virginia swamp and named it Jamestown. It was not a triumph, it was a disaster. Within the first year, most of the colonists were dead. Starvation, disease. Some, according to colonial accounts, resorted to eating the leather off their own shoes. This was not the heroic founding you picture. It was closer to a failed startup that happened to survive on its 3rd or 4th attempt. Why did it survive at all? Historian Alan Taylor, in his research on early America, makes a case that rarely shows up in a textbook. Colonial America was never one clean story. It was a chaotic collision of empires, Spanish, French, Dutch, English, all fighting over the same strip of land, while hundreds of distinct indigenous nations negotiated, resisted, and formed shifting alliances with each of them. The straight line you were taught, from Plymouth Rock to the 4th of July, is a myth built after the fact. The real version had no guaranteed ending. By the 1770s, 13 of these English colonies had grown wealthy enough and resentful enough to attempt something no one had built at scale before. Not a kingdom, a republic, run without a king. Here's the twist most people miss. The American Revolution wasn't really about taxes. Historian Gordon Wood spent decades studying the founding generation, and his conclusion cuts against the version taught in a single-class period. The tax complaints were real, but they were the surface. Underneath was something more radical. An entire generation had started to believe political power should come from ordinary people instead of bloodlines and crowns. That idea was dangerous. It was untested anywhere in the world, and it nearly failed on the battlefield. George Washington lost more battles than he won. The Continental Army nearly dissolved from lack of pay, lack of food, lack of belief that any of it would work. Independence was not inevitable. It was closer to a coin flip that happened to land the right way. Then came the part almost nobody dramatizes. After the war was won, the new country nearly collapsed under its own government. The first American Constitution, the Articles of Confederation, was so weak that the federal government couldn't even raise taxes to pay its own soldiers. In 1786, farmers in Massachusetts picked up weapons in what became known as Shays' Rebellion, and for a moment, the entire experiment looked like it might implode from the inside, only 10 years after independence. So they rewrote it, in secret. In a locked room in Philadelphia, in the summer of 1787, delegates threw out the old rules and built something new. The Constitution you still live under today. But here's what rarely gets said out loud. That document was built on a compromise so painful it would take a civil war and roughly 600,000 American lives to resolve. Slavery was written into the framework of the country from its very first draft, not as an accident, but as a bargain, a trade made so that Southern states would agree to join the Union at all. That contradiction did not stay buried. It grew for 80 years, underneath westward expansion, underneath a booming economy, underneath a country that kept telling itself a story about liberty while denying it to millions of the people living inside its own borders. Settlers pushed west under the banner of manifest destiny, a belief that expansion was not just profitable, but divinely owed to them. For the indigenous nations already living on that land, expansion meant broken treaties, forced removals, and the Trail of Tears, where thousands died on a march they never agreed to take. The country was growing. It was also breaking promises as fast as it made them. By 1861, the slavery contradiction finally split the country in half. The Civil War remains the single deadliest event in American history. More Americans died fighting each other in 4 years than died in both world wars combined. When it finally ended, the country did not simply heal. Slavery was abolished, but within a decade, Reconstruction collapsed, and a new system of legal segregation took its place for the next 100 years. Notice something strange here. Every time this country nearly broke, it didn't come back together because everyone suddenly agreed. It came back together because enough people decided the idea underneath it was still worth fighting for, even while they were furious at each other. The next act arrived fast. Waves of immigrants poured through Ellis Island chasing an idea, not a guarantee. Factories rose. Railroads connected a continent. And then, in 1929, the entire economy collapsed overnight. Economists Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz later studied exactly why the Great Depression became so catastrophic, and their research pointed to something uncomfortable. It wasn't only the stock market crash, it was the response afterward, a series of decisions by the country's own central bank that turned a bad recession into the worst economic collapse in modern American history. Millions lost jobs. Families lost homes. And still, somehow, the country did not fracture completely. It reorganized itself instead. Then 2 world wars reshaped what America even was on the global stage. A country that started as a fragile coastal experiment became, by 1945, one of 2 dominant powers on Earth. Factories that once built cars now built tanks and aircraft at a scale no other nation could match. The war ended, but a new kind of standoff began immediately, a decades-long tension with the Soviet Union that shaped nearly every decision the country made for the next 50 years. And through all of it, the original contradiction from 1787 was still waiting, unresolved. In the 1950s and 60s, the civil rights movement forced the country to look directly at the gap between what it claimed to believe and what it had actually built. Segregation laws fell. Voting protections expanded. But notice the pattern again. None of it happened because the country simply agreed with itself. It happened because people pushed, and pushed hard, against a system that did not want to change. That pattern hasn't stopped. It's still running right now, quieter, in a different form. Political scientist Robert Putnam spent years researching what actually holds a country together on an ordinary Tuesday, not through laws, but through trust. His research found something unsettling. The everyday bonds that once connected Americans to their neighbors, their communities, their sense of shared identity, have been quietly thinning for decades. Fewer shared meals. Fewer shared institutions. Fewer moments where strangers had to actually depend on each other. A country doesn't get built once in 1776 and then coast on that forever. It has to be rebuilt, quietly, in every single generation, or the thing holding it together starts to wear thin. So think about what you're actually looking at the next time fireworks explode above your head on a summer night. You are not looking at a finished product. You are not looking at a clean story that was destined to happen exactly this way. You are looking at the visible tip of 4 centuries of near collapse, contradiction, luck, and stubborn belief in an idea that never should have worked as well as it did. The colonists starving in Jamestown had no idea they were founding anything. The soldiers freezing at Valley Forge had no guarantee their cause would win. The delegates locked in that room in Philadelphia had no idea whether their compromise would hold for a decade, let alone 250 years. Nobody who lived through any single chapter of this story knew how it would end. You are the only one who gets to see every chapter at once. So the next time those fireworks light up the sky over a country that is only 250 years old, remember this: you are not watching a beginning. You are watching whatever managed to survive.